Dad. All right, good evening. Thanks, Dad. So it's been a while since I spoke on Sunday nights. This is actually a privilege. I appreciate the opportunity, and thank you all for attending. And so I hope this will be a good discussion. I hope this will be a good approach and a good time together in the Lord's house tonight. So entitled this "Lights in the Sky." Basically, this is it's a presentation on the UFO phenomenon based on this book by Gary Bates, "Alien Intrusion: UFOs and the Evolution Connection," and we'll explore that a little bit later as we go on. It's an excellent presentation. It's over 400 pages of data and information and analysis of this whole phenomenon, just going through case after case after case. He explores the movies. He explores all these different things and how they've impacted our culture and all these things. So a lot of what I'm presenting tonight comes from this man's work, so I definitely need to give him credit for it. So it's excellent for Gary Bates to have done this, and it's much appreciated and much needed today for sure. All right, so basically, you probably, I'll start with an outline. Tonight, we'll talk about, I'll introduce the subject, kind of why we're doing this, because this is a strange topic to even be talking about in church. I admit that. I readily admit that. This is really weird. But nonetheless, I think it is something that is out there, it's in our culture, and it's something we need to address. And I will explore that as we go on as to why. Talk about our culture. Actually, fiscal policy, there's quite a bit of your money that's spent on this every day. And then scientific problems will actually be the majority of what we talk about tonight. It'll be interesting. No, it's not going to be. I'm not going to get into too much technobabble. Don't worry about that. It'll be okay. But now next week, we'll get a little bit heavier and maybe even a little bit darker when we get into abductions. What are the aliens actually telling us in these abductions and these messages that people supposedly receive from them? And then what is really going on? Who are these creatures? Who are these beings? And what does that really mean for us? That'll be all next week. So definitely come back for next week if you want to hear the conclusion of the matter, because I will leave you hanging at the end of tonight. So sorry, but that's just how the writing went. So sorry. So why talk about this at all? Well, over 20 million people in the United States have claimed to have seen a UFO. That's a lot of people. 20 million people. Now, on top of that, as many as 4 million have claimed to have been abducted by aliens. That's over 1% of our population. So to put that into perspective, there were roughly, I think I did the count this morning, there were 128, I think, people here this morning at church. There were 95 in the sanctuary. So statistically speaking, there would be one person in that group of people that would have been abducted according to that statistic. And these are both quoted by Gary Bates. So I say not saying there's somebody here this morning that was. I'm just saying, just to put that into perspective, it doesn't take a whole lot of people statistically to get that number. So that is, so it's a lot of people. It's a lot of people. And so the odds of you meeting someone that has been through this kind of an experience is relatively low. I mean, the probability is relatively high, relatively high. So something to keep in mind. Our culture is absolutely enamored with this idea of life on other planets. Over 70% of the U.S. population believes the government is hiding something. They are hiding knowledge of extraterrestrial life. And that number is disturbing to me, actually, because it's influenced our entertainment, for sure. If our population is interested in something, I can guarantee you someone is going to try to make money off of that. And Hollywood has done that in spades. Our fiscal policy has been affected. And even made its way into the church. Because how do you get 70% of the population without including some Christians? You don't. And I can assure you the other 30% are not Bible-believing Christians either. There's some atheists in that group. Because there's a lot of atheists that reject the idea. So, that to me is somewhat disturbing. There are a lot of people out there who claim to be Christians, claim it, but they're open to this idea. And I think we'll understand why here a little bit later. Entertainment, so I know you probably can't read all of these, but on this list there's Aliens, Independence Day, Star Wars, Star Trek, Roswell, X-Files, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, I threw that in there because that's kind of more of the foundational movie that helped companies come along. War of the Worlds, the original radio broadcast back in the 1930s, spooked a lot of people back then, definitely laid some groundwork for today. Close Encounters of the Third Kind was definitely one that Steven Spielberg's masterpiece that changed the way our culture looks at aliens in general. Signs, and of course Men in Black. I had to throw that one in there. There are literally billions of dollars represented on that screen. Billions and billions of dollars represented on that screen. Independence Day, I don't remember if it grossed $1 billion, but it was definitely up there. Star Wars, all the movies combined would definitely be at that level. Star Trek has multiple movies, as well as one of the longest running syndicated television shows in history. X-Files was a groundbreaking and revolutionary way they did television. And then, of course, Superman. I mean, he's an extraterrestrial. Everybody knows him. Anyway, on and on and on it goes. So anyway, somebody has made a lot of money. In fact, a lot of people have made a lot of money off of our culture's fascination with this. So anyway, and also there's a lot of video games and a lot of board games and all those things that it's everywhere. It's everywhere. And there's more to it than that, for sure. There's also what I'm going to call science documentaries out there, and I'm using science very loosely here. I was watching several of these the other day. There's some on Netflix that you can watch. They talk about that there's all this evidence for aliens and our government's involvement, because why? They've got to be in there. The government's got to know something, right? One claims there's an underground alien base in New Mexico in the desert housing over 100 alien species. These are well documented. And the government doesn't want you to know about this. That's why they declassified it. Some reason. But anyway, so our government's in a pact with them, allowing them to abduct and experiment on a certain portion of our population in exchange for technology. That begs the question, why in the world would an alien race that can travel all the way here need to enter into an alliance with us at all? Why can't they just do it? In human history, when a very advanced civilization shows up at a very primitive culture, what do? They just start doing stuff. They don't really ask for permission. We've seen that many, many times. So not sure why the aliens would feel like they have to ask permission. Another claims there's an underwater base off the coast of Los Angeles, California. California is kind of a hot spot, LA in particular, for extraterrestrial activity. And so a lot of people believe there's an underwater alien base out there, and that is supported by very good blurry photographic evidence. So it has to be real. Of course, let's not forget about Area 51, right? Everybody knows about Area 51. Everything going on there has got to be something covered up there, because they just don't ever tell us anything about it. So what is it? Has to be UFOs, obviously. But these are not real science at all. These are sensationalist attempts, and they're usually made to make money. If you watch their program, you're going to see the commercials, and that's going to make somebody money. That's usually what these all come down to. There are other ones out there as well, like Ancient Aliens, for example. I was actually talking to somebody about that this morning. That documentary, and that talks about the ancients building the pyramids, building, like on Easter Island, for example, those massive structures, massive head structures that are out there, the Mayan pyramids, all these different ancient wonders that are so superbly built. There's no way ancient man could have ever done that, so they had to have help from a more advanced race to come down to help us. That's the idea. And that boils down to one particular concept, which we'll get to a little bit later. Policy. So millions of your dollars are spent every year in the pursuit of extraterrestrial life. So congratulations, we're all in it together. Probably against our will, quite frankly. Anyway, this is headed up by NASA. NASA struggled for many years to find a mission after the moon landing. So yay, we beat the Russians, now what? NASA had a problem. They needed funding, or else they're all going to lose their jobs. So now, and Gary Bates talks about this, how NASA struggled tremendously for many years trying to find a mission, because once we landed on the moon one time, going back a second time is kind of anticlimactic, and so public interest waned, and so their funding got cut, and you got a lot of smart people that don't want to lose their jobs, because that, because that's kind of a good gravy train there if you can get it. It's a good gig if you can get it. So they came up with this Origins program. And so they created a new field of study called astrobiology. So they made up science. I mean, that's a really sweet deal if you can get that. I wish I could do that. That'd be neat. But anyway, so they created this whole brand new field, and Gary Bates quotes NASA as saying, astrobiology is this. It's the study of life in the universe. It's a new field of research that covers the origin, evolution, of course it has to be evolution, distribution, and destiny of life wherever it might exist. There is one beautiful thing about this science. It can never be proven wrong. Ever. Because we can go out to 50,000 planets, and if we don't find life there, that's fine. That just adds to this data, and we'll just keep looking. No problem. So that's a really sweet deal if you can get that, which is really beyond the scope of science, quite frankly. If science is not falsifiable, it's hardly science. But anyway. But hey, whatever, right? We'll just write a check. We'll pay for it. No big deal. In fact, you can even download software. There's a ton of data that comes in from satellites and all these different things. We're trying to decipher if there's any aliens that are trying to connect with us. I know years ago you could do this. I'm pretty sure you still can. Where when your computer goes idle, if you're not using it, actively using it, it goes idle, it'll actually donate your processing power to help parse out, help decipher a lot of this data. Of course, nowadays with modern computers, this is probably less important. But still, you can be part of the solution. You can be part of the discovery if you really want to be. I'm sure they'll give you credit. If it was your computer that did it, probably not. But anyway, the millions and millions of dollars every year is spent on this. But also, I talked about the church too. There is a problem for the church as well. President Jimmy Carter didn't help us at all in 1976 when he said that he spoke of a UFO that he saw in 1969. He vowed to declassify everything if he was elected president about UFOs, because he was convinced they existed. He did nothing. He didn't do a thing. So there's two things that are possible there. One, what the UFO community says, that he got silenced. He would say he got into office, some powerful people in the government said, we don't care if you are the president or not. You're not going to do this. You're not going to do it. If you like your job or living, you're not going to do anything. The other possibility is there was nothing to reveal. That's the other possibility. There actually wasn't anything. And so that's the position I personally take. But still, he didn't do anything. So how can we handle this from someone who does claim to be a born-again Christian? Because Jimmy Carter did use, there are stories about Jimmy Carter that are very good, using his position to witness to other world leaders, and he was sincere and all those different, so that's, it's hard to argue with that, but this is a problem. This is a problem. And we can, like I said, we'll get to that a little bit later too. And the other problems are from the secular community, from the secular world. How can we as Christians claim that we're the only life in this gigantic universe? There's this massive universe, all this space, all these stars, all these worlds, all these planets and galaxies, all these things. That's a lot of wasted space and effort if we're it. That's the argument. It's a lot of wasted space and effort if we're the only ones. That's one approach. And then how can we deny that aliens exist with all these people claiming, 4 million, claiming to have met them and been abducted by them, and then 20 on top of that, or 20 in addition to that, that have claimed to have seen their lights in the sky, their ships. Surely something is going on. And I agree, something is going on. But it's just not what people may think it is. I'll go ahead and let you guys in on the heart of the matter now, and we'll come back to this later as well in the second one. And this will be the theme of the whole night, this whole series. It boils down to one word. That one. Evolution. That's what it all boils down to. NASA spoke of it themselves, the origin and evolution of life everywhere else. This is the key to the whole thing. A departure from Genesis, believing it as actual, literal history, opens the door to all of these ideas. This is how you get Christians believing in extraterrestrial life. You leave that, you leave Genesis, you're open to this. You have to be. Because if you start accepting evolution, it's really hard to argue against the possibility of alien and extraterrestrial life. The underlying assumption is that if life evolved here, it had to evolve somewhere else. It just had to. Or we're the seeds of somebody, or the seeds of another race, or whatever. That has to be, and it's hard to argue against that if you leave the biblical approach. Very hard, because you really have nothing to stand on. So where did we come from? This is a familiar question. You spoke on it this morning. This is one of the fundamental questions of life. How we answer this question ultimately determines how we look at life in general and our place in the universe. I mean, it comes down to that. It's one of the fundamental questions. NASA, I took this from their website, answering the question, how did we get here, is one of the key goals of NASA's astrophysics division. So that's actually somewhat of a blend of science and not so much science. It's also the prime directive and objective, not directive, prime objective of its cosmic origins program. So astrophysics does involve some real science, some operational real science with rocketry and the shuttle design and actually, and also space probes we've launched that we can slingshot around planets and get somewhere and all these things, these amazing, amazing things that some of the most brilliant minds in our culture can do. But it also involves that stuff about where did we get here? That's where science kind of leaves science and goes into philosophy and starts meddling in places it really doesn't belong. But hey, we're paying for it, so it's cool. So they're looking to the stars for answers. Because what did Carl Sagan say? We're all made of star stuff? That's what he said at one point. So they're looking out there for answers. Where do we look? We look at the Bible. Right? The Bible says we're created by God in His image. So that is what distinguishes real Bible-believing Christians. And that is the heart of the matter. That is the actual thing. Where do we come from? Science says one thing. We say something quite different. And the end point where you get to, the end point of both of those starting points is nowhere close to each other. And that's a huge, huge, huge thing. But there is a problem to all this, and that is this, the problem of interstellar travel. So why can it not be real physical aliens, whatever they might look like us or like anything else, or the typical ones you see, the gray creatures with the big eyes and the typical Roswell ones. Warp speed. There are all famous, we all know the famous methods from science fiction, of travel in science fiction. Star Trek has warp drive. Star Wars has hyperdrive. There are many others. Stargate was the Stargates. They were basically wormhole generators that would generate a wormhole you could walk through and immediately be transported to a distant world. That was how they fast traveled. Why do they need this? Well, science fiction is entertainment. So these are all hand-waving ways of crossing vast distances in time periods that fit very nicely into the span of a movie or a 1-hour TV show. That's what they're for. It's not for anything real. It's what they're for. There is a little bit of science behind it, but we'll get to that in a minute. So real interstellar travel is hindered by several problems. One of them I like to call actually physics itself. It's the physical distance between the stars and our planets, and also the energy required to overcome the multiple obstacles it takes to get there. The first one is distance. Space is big. Really big. Really, really big. Space is massive. Proxima Centauri is the closest star to Earth. Well, it's named that. It's 4.2 light years away. And a light year is the distance light travels in 1 year, which is 5.88 trillion miles. Okay? So you got 4 of those, 4.2 of those. And so if you were traveling at the speed of light, it would take you 4.2 years to get there. If you can get to the speed of light, which that is the fastest possible theoretical distance that we know. That's Einsteinian relativity. That's the fastest you can go as far as what we know. If you want to traverse the entire Milky Way galaxy, if you want to go from one point to the other, all the way across it, you need 100,000 years to do that. If you want to go to Andromeda, which is the closest galaxy to us, you would need 2.3 million years to get there at the speed of light. So that's a long, stinking way. A long way. It's amazing we can even see that. But, I mean, still, it's there. We have the light from it. So do you now see the need for warp drive? I don't want to sit through a TV show where all they're doing is taking forever to get somewhere. That's not very entertaining. I mean, warp drive does what hyperdrive does, is it allows the span for a commercial break for one. Secondly, it also gives you just enough time to have that crucial conference meeting or that some drama to happen, and then you immediately arrive right when that scene ends. It's a convenient way of doing all of that. And so there is some science behind all of that, but it's you definitely could never claim that it's real at this point. The next thing is energy, and this is another huge piece of all this. To get the energy required to propel a vessel to the speed of light, which is 186,000 miles a second, is enormous. It's absolutely enormous to get to that velocity. So to take the space shuttle, for example, so a ship that we all are familiar with is a space shuttle. It would take the energy equivalent to the detonation of 23 million atomic bombs to get to half the speed of light. So I'm not saying you got to blow up that many bombs, but the energy released in 23 million atomic bombs, if you can harness that and transfer it into thrust, you could take the space shuttle to half the speed of light. Just half, not the full thing, half. It's theoretically impossible to get all the way up there because of just mass itself. It's just impossible. But anyway, if you want to get to 90% the speed of light, you need 73 million of them. That's a lot. That's a boatload. That is an extreme amount. That's just 90%. That's not the full speed. And once you're at that speed, you've got another major problem. You've got to stop. You have to slow down at some point. You don't have friction to slow you down either. You're just going to keep going until you hit something. And so you need that much energy to slow down and stop. And then you also have to somehow compensate for the massive G-forces you're about ready to put on your poor crew that you've got volunteer for this that just want to be greasy stains on the windshield. That's about all you're going to get. So yeah, you got to stop. So it's equal amount of energy to slow you back down. So now, I mean, it's just tonight. So if you're going to take that many A-bombs with you, you better be. So the point of all that is, the energy requirements are just unfathomable to get to that speed. But don't worry, though. Science fiction has the answer. Science fiction has inertial dampeners. Star Trek talks about those. To stop all the G-forces, they handle all that. How they don't break every other second, I have no idea. Warp drive to bend space and time to overcome the distances. And then matter-antimatter reactors, which in Star Trek are catalyzed by dilithium crystals, which we get to hear that dilithium in Star Trek. That's what that's from. It's to provide the energy you need, all the energy you need. Not a problem. And warp drive, what it does, it's basically if you take a sheet of paper and you're at one end and you want to get to the other, you just bend it to that, and then you just travel through it. And then when you stop, you're where you're supposed to be. That's how warp drive works. But you still have to go really fast, and you're still relatively going as fast as fast as it says. So I mean, but the energy to do that, to bend space-time, is not trivial. So all of these technologies are barely out of the theoretically possible phase. So there is some science behind it. You can watch TV shows on it. That's not a problem at all. But still, it's just not going to work. It's not possible under our current understanding of how physics works. And other problems too, such as space particles, don't help. Encountering a particle the size of a pea, going just 50% the speed of light. So you're halfway to there, but 50% the speed, it would hit your ship with the equivalent kinetic energy of 2.2 A-bombs. Is what that would do. Now, Star Trek has an answer for that. They invented deflector shields. Not a problem. So, okay, that's cool, but that even further compounds the problem of the energy you need. You've got to be constantly absorbing these impacts as you're traveling at this speed. So that further ups the energy demand. First of all, you've got to propel a massive ship to that level, and then you have to handle all these things hitting you. So yeah, I mean, it's estimated, this is from Bates's book, it's estimated there are 100,000 dust particles per cubic kilometer of space. It's going to be one bumpy ride if you're out there for this. So the reason that most of our spacecrafts, are they in danger of these things? Yeah, they are, but they're not going this speed, is the thing. We don't have craft going anywhere close to this speed. I mean, you're talking at half the speed of light. I mean, it's 98 or 93,000 miles per second. I mean, we don't have anything going that fast. But that's what we're talking about here. So if you just want to get to that level, it's going to be a long, long way, and you're probably not going to get any sleep on the way. So just to give this a graphic example, so you're in your cute little ship. It's nice, and you're flying along. And so then comes this one little particle of dust. Can everybody see that? It's right there. So what happens? So that plus dust equals kaboom. You're done. So unless you have deflector shields or whatever science fiction can give you, that's what you're going to be. You're going to be one big pile of toast at the end of all this. And that's just reality. That's the physics. That's what's real, not sci-fi. This is what's real. So what's actually going on here? So it's shown here, physics basically prohibits interstellar travel to the work of science fiction. It's not real. Certainly not under our idea. You can argue that, well, maybe the aliens just figured out problems to all this. Like, well, it's still physics. It's still actual laws of nature and the universe and how these things work. So, I mean, it's not just some hand-waving thing, well, maybe they figured it out. I mean, you have to come up with a real solution for this, which is not simple. So if it's not real aliens causing all these strange phenomenon that people report, they really do report these, they really believe things are happening, what is really going on? What's really happening? So there are multiple theories for this. And well, I'll cover this first, actually. Many of the supposed sightings are simply hoaxes or misidentifications. And I do have to comment on that. I'm not going to spend much time here, but I do want to say there are many, many, many hoaxsters out there and charlatans that play off of people's fears or their predispositions to these things and things like that to either make money, to get notoriety. There are many of those out there. A bunch of them. In fact, he has a whole chapter on it in his book. One in particular, if you guys can remember, I think it was 1996. There was a documentary that came out called Alien Autopsy. I remember seeing it when I was a kid, when I was in high school. I didn't see it in high school. I just happened to be in high school at the time. And so it was supposedly found footage from the Roswell crash where they were in Area 51. They autopsied all these aliens. It was hosted by Jonathan Frakes, which was Commander Riker from Star Trek. Had a lot of production value to it, a lot of money poured into this. 100% wrong and 100% lie. 100% hoax. But somebody made a lot of money off of it because it aired on national television, I think a couple of times. Just a huge amount of publicity went into all of that. So somebody walked away with a massive wad of cash from that, but it was 100% wrong. So that is a piece of it. And then other ones some of them are honest misidentifications. So that just happens, but those are just honest mistakes. But there are a few that still remain unexplained. All right. So one thing that we have to be cautious here is that as Christians we might dismiss these things as saying it's all foolishness and silly, but we have to remember these are real people who really believe that something real happened to them, because odds are it did. So, I mean, this is, like I said, beyond the hoaxes, beyond the misidentifications, beyond the lies, there are several cases out there that you can't simply dismiss like that. And so, like I said, it's real people with a real eternity that really believe something like that, really believe that these things happen and these things are real. And like I said, there is something going on. So we can't just walk away from it, dismiss it, and that's it. It's not that simple. So beyond the hoaxes, there are many theories about what these beings really are and who they are. Some still cling to the idea of interstellar beings from further down the evolutionary path that happen to have come up with solutions for all of these things. There's a big group out there that believe that. Others, they do concede the problem of interstellar travel. They say, nope, that's not really possible, but they believe that these are interdimensional travelers. So from another dimension that hitch a ride over to our dimension and they interact with us that way. How that works exactly, I have no idea. They probably don't either. But anyway, that's a theory out there. Others still suppose that these sightings are actually humans from the distant future, and they're coming back to help us. They're far more advanced, more highly evolved, and they're coming back to help us in our evolutionary growth. That's also another possibility that's out there. So what is it? I'm not going to answer that tonight. Next week. Sorry. But next week we'll explore this phenomenon more deeply, and we'll actually go into abductions. We'll look at what's called the classical abduction syndrome, which covers, abductions actually have a fairly regular and common theme to them, and multiple steps that are usually repeated with people that go through it. And we'll talk about those, what happens in all those things, and then there's almost always the abductee gets a message from the aliens. And what is that message? We'll try to figure out what's really happening to these people. And then finally, we'll discuss, most importantly, who these beings really are. So next week's really going to be the meat of it. But what I want you to leave from tonight, what I want you to leave with tonight is, it can't be real physical beings that are doing all this. There's just too much physics in the way. So what is it? And as Christians, and I'll mention that too. As Christians, we have to say it can't be real physical beings either, because we're the ones created in the image of God. And Adam's sin brought death, decay to the whole world, and by extension, the universe. And so, where are they in this created order? If they exist, where are they in this whole thing? That's a very tough question to answer. Now, if unfortunately a lot of the Christian world has departed from Genesis and left that as just a fairy tale, so for them it's much easier, although it's great error to do that. So, like I said, next week we'll get a little bit darker talking about these abductions, because there are some pretty sad stories that go along with that. But most importantly, I won't leave you hanging next week. We'll identify who they are next week.